You're laughing too. Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is our April Lunch and Learn. This is part of a series that the Sustainable Blacksburg, Town of Blacksburg, and the Blacksburg Library do jointly. We offer a monthly topic on really a whole range of sustainability topics. You know, it's been as diverse as black bears to green burial to the speakers we're going to be hearing about today and their case to preserve Reggie. And I'm not going to steal their thunder and get into it. Am I standing too close to you? I don't know what happened. We're going to try again. But these are our speakers, Chase Counts and Billy Weitzenfeld. I've had the pleasure of actually getting to work with both of these gentlemen in the Wayback Machine. We won't say how long, but I know them very well over many years working on energy and energy policy issues in the New River Valley. Is it this? Oh, is it because, should I be muted here? Adjusting that too.
I think it's getting close.
I think we're just making sure that the folks at home can also hear us. So I'm going to stand awkwardly off camera. I think give us a second.
Turn off your speaker.
Oh, can I just not mute this, or is that going to mess it up? I think that'll.
No, you want to be heard through there, but you don't want to sound back to your speaker.
Okay. Do you know what to do?
Or it could be our system.
Okay.
I'm just having
This is making for great video. All right, can somebody who's on Zoom let me know if you can still hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yep, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, so back at it, I've worked with these gentlemen quite a bit over the years, and I'm so pleased to have them here presenting today on this topic, because I think it's a really important story about really just showing up for what's right. And they're going to talk to you about everything that went into this Reggie case and where we are today. I also want to alert you to next month's topic. I want to reach for the flyer, but I'm scared to do it. Chase, can you give me some assistance? So the topic is drinking water quality, and the description is, do you ever wonder about the factors that impact drinking water quality? Erin Ling, who some of you may know, is a senior extension specialist in biological systems engineering at Virginia Tech and the coordinator of the Virginia Household Water Quality Program. She's going to come and discuss with us common contaminants and concerns about both public and private water supplies, management of private water supplies, and approaches to solving water problems. And for those participants who actually are on a private well, she will share resources on how to get your water tested. So that will be the May topic, and it'll be, again, here always on the 4th, Wednesdays from 12 to 1 p.m. at the library. Last little bit of housekeeping. This Saturday, we are having an invasive species and restoration community day at Heritage Park. It's going to be from 12 to 6 p.m. with lots of concurrent workshops. I will be there. We are talking about the Heritage Park Restoration Project, but also water sampling, aquatic species that are indicator species of both pollution and healthy water. We're going to have a demo of different invasive species removal techniques, from mechanical removal to safe ways that people can use herbicides that are commercially available. And the Southwest Virginia Wildlife Center will be there as well with some animal ambassadors showing and talking about how invasive species impact our wildlife. Last thing I will announce is the following weekend on May 3rd is the twice annual Repair Cafe that we do in partnership with the Habitat Restore. That's just a way for people to bring stuff that can be repaired to the Habitat Restore. And we've got different stations. You can bring things that need to be mended, clothing, electronics, house plants that you're having a tough time with. No judgment. We'll take a look at them and see if we can give you some advice. So with that, is there anything else that I'm forgetting, Anne, to present? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. Take it away, Chase.
Hopefully the speaker's working. Can you all hear me? All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. And I think we got the feedback issue squared away. So thank you all. My name is Chase Counts. I'm the current executive director of the Association of Energy Conservation Professionals. Appreciate you guys spending some time here at the Lunch and Learn. I see the learn part is really doing the heavy lifting. Don't see much lunch. And but fortunately, we have the luxury, the pleasure of having our previous executive director of the Association of Energy Conservation Professionals, Mr. Billy Weitzenfeld, available with us, who was in the role for 35 years, basically. And I've assumed the role just as of last July, so less than a year into this role, and but worked closely with Billy for the prior nearly 15 years leading up to it. And I want to thank Carol Davis for inviting us to come speak on this and share the little victories that we need more now than ever. And thank you all for joining us. So quick show of hands. Did anybody participate years and years ago in Solarized Blacksburg or Solarized Montgomery? All right. So that's what Carol was alluding to. That's when we first really started working together, including Solarized Floyd and some others in the area. So it's nice to be back in this room where I've spoken with you previously. So I mentioned myself, a little background on myself. So I'm actually a Virginia Tech alumni. I went through environmental policy and planning, which I hear is no longer a program. But I spent several years in mechanical engineering prior to that. I wound up taking a 1-credit course called Residential Energy Evaluation, where I was introduced to Mr. Anthony Cox, who's the lead trainer at the Community Housing Partners Energy Solutions Weatherization Training Center, which just happens to be conveniently located down the street in Christiansburg. And it's honestly a world-renowned, I can say, not just nationally renowned training center. I got hooked on weatherization and residential energy efficiency. From that point, I started as a building science and weatherization trainer. I wound up taking on some programs, running some programs like the Solarized campaigns. We tried an efficiency campaign, Energized Blacksburg. Didn't really pan out as well as we would have liked. And I wound up building out private partnerships with our utilities in Virginia to support and leverage their funds against our federal weatherization funds. And that wound up leading to additional opportunities to seek new innovative funding sources like that, which came from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that we're here to talk about, how we use those funds to support serving the households that really needed the energy efficiency services most. And that was the homes that were in disrepair, that were just too unsafe or just couldn't receive weatherization services safely or effectively before those repairs are taken care of. So what we're going to talk about today is give a little background on who AECP is, what RGGI is, how we got Virginia involved, how Virginia utilized the RGGI funds and how it benefited Virginians. We give a little update on what's the deal with the lawsuit that AECP is currently in with Virginia's governor, represented by Southern Environmental Law Center, and why we felt the need to step up and where we go from here. So to start, the AECP is it's actually two organizations. It's a 501c6 trade association that represents all of the weatherization agencies within Virginia. Quick show of hands, because I love gauging crowds. Is anybody here familiar with the term weatherization? I'm speaking to a loaded crowd. That's usually not the turnout. For those that may not be familiar, weatherization is, the way I kind of frame it is, it's both the art and the science of making homes more energy efficient, healthier, safer, more comfortable for the occupants. And there's a lot that goes into it. And Ed can talk all day about it too, Shelter Alternative. So we the program, you might not imagine there's much interest from a private market standpoint in supporting low-income households receive weatherization services. There's just no market incentive. So it required a market intervention. Back in the 1970s, the Weatherization Assistance Program was formed and run through Department of Energy. And so it's been around for 48 years. We're hoping to make it to 50, but we'll see what happens. And that's really been the foundation for building an industry that is now called the home performance industry. But it's always had the foundation of the federal resources. And there's always been a gap, a need for what we refer to as weatherization readiness or deferral repairs. So those are what we talked about earlier, the repairs that are needed before we can safely, effectively install energy efficiency measures. Easiest example you might think of, a leaking roof. So if we're not going to, in our good conscience, install insulation in an attic using taxpayer dollars if there's an active roof leak. That wouldn't be a prudent, judicious use of federal resources, your tax dollars. So we would need to have that roof leak addressed before we install that insulation. You might pick up that there's not a lot of market incentives on the private markets to patch those leaks, and the households that need them the most can't really afford those repairs. So we needed another market intervention, and that's how we get to the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, which is funded through RGGI. So should mention that AECP been around for well over 30 plus years. Billy really founded the organization with a few others and has been the longtime executive director. And just to brag on Billy a little bit, had to prepare this last summer for his retirement, which you can see is going so well as he's standing next to me. Is back in the mid 90s, early 90s, there's another pot of resources available at the federal level called the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. It's gotten some coverage in the news lately because the staff was completely let go, and it runs through Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. Well, up to 25% of the LIHEAP funds, LIHEAP is used for bill assistance. If you can't afford your bills, you income qualify, you may be eligible for LIHEAP to help cover those bill expenses. Well, up to 25% of those LIHEAP funds in each state can be transferred over to the weatherization program. LIHEAP far exceeds the amount of funding resources that we have from Department of Energy's weatherization assistance program. So Billy led the charge in making sure that Virginia actually had access to those LIHEAP transfer dollars to weatherization. It was a long, hard fight. There's a lot of opposition. Billy famously nearly got into a fist fight with a legislator in the Capitol building. And but what that ultimately has resulted in, we did the math, that resulted in approximately $300 million being made available to support weatherization for low-income Virginians since the 90s. That's huge. It's a tremendous impact. And that's kind of legacy that Billy hasn't quite stepped away from.
Don't worry, I won't fight it.
So, so a little bit about AECP. We also represent the weatherization industry. There are currently 14 weatherization assistance program providers that cover every square inch of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Community Housing Partners down the street in Christiansburg is one of those providers where I was working. And now that you know a little bit about AECP, we're going to talk about RGGI, what it is, and how we got involved. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which we often refer to as RGGI, is the first mandatory market-based program in the United States the outcome is to reduce the power sector emissions. And, this was actually formulated, this was formulated based on conservative market principles from a professor at UVA way back in, I think, the 90s. Way back. And the idea is for the power plants to purchase allowances, carbon emission allowances at auction. So it creates a market and an incentive to reduce your emissions based on market principles, as opposed to having a federal mandate say no more emissions. Currently, there are 11 active Northeastern and Mid-Atlantic states. Virginia previously was one of those, and we'll share a little bit more about where Virginia stands in that regard. The proceeds that are generated from these RGGI auctions, the states have the ability to determine what they want to spend those on. They are primarily focused on energy efficiency programs, clean energy programs, and other resiliency initiatives. But in some cases, states might opt to have a percentage of those RGGI allowances returned directly to the utility customers, the utility ratepayers, so what they may call them. Because in Virginia, this was the 2020 General Assembly. We caught rumors in like fall of 2019 that there might be a bill proposed that would instate Virginia into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which would be the southernmost state to participate at this point in time, still are. And it wound up being included in the Clean Energy and Community Flood Preparedness Act, which I believe was incorporated within the Virginia Clean Economy Act, if you're familiar. But it was passed and it went into law July 1st of 2020. And Virginia's first Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auction was in March of 2021. So that's when Virginia started receiving proceeds generated from RGGI. And they, in the law that was passed, it earmarked, or the state decided that the funds would be used for two purposes. 45% of the proceeds would go to a flood preparedness program that is run by Department of Conservation and Recreation, which I'm not an authority on, so we won't be speaking to that. The other 50% would go towards low-income energy efficiency programs. And that was run through Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. And we'll focus on that angle. The remaining 5%, if you were doing the math, that goes towards program administration across the state agencies involved. Billy, am I missing anything? Thank you. Positive reinforcement, that's what I need. So let's see. Covered that. Yeah, one thing I will mention, and I appreciate that Billy ran some numbers by me before we met. When RGGI started in 2005, it established not an arbitrary, but it established a cap. And every subsequent year, that cap on emissions would gradually decline, and that would provide that much more incentive for household or for the states and the power plants to reduce their emissions. And I think Billy just mentioned that since on average, the participating states, excluding Virginia, that have been in RGGI really since 2005, their emissions, power plant emissions, have dropped by 50%.
47%. So that's pretty significant.
47%. Yeah, and then in Virginia, since joining in 2021, it was
22%.
Virginia had dropped emissions by 22%. And so there's controversy about, okay, how much did Reggie actually contribute towards that versus previously scheduled decommissioning of coal plants or other fossil fuel plants. But at the end of the day, there's a strong correlation, arguably causation for those emissions, and it's tied to Virginia's participation in Reggie. And those dollars, those proceeds that are generated, that results in real economic activity for Virginia. We are in the middle of producing a report on the impact of the low-income energy efficiency programs, which are collectively referred to as the Housing Innovations in Energy Efficiency, or HIE, you may hear me refer to. The HIE program is what Virginia DHCD administers. And those programs and services, we're reaching all pockets of the Commonwealth. If I'd had more time to actually put together a presentation, I'd show a heat map about where those services are actually going from the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program and the other program that's funded through HIE, which is called the Affordable Special Needs Housing Supplemental Program. The impact is staggering. Nearly the entire state, nearly every county, locality in the state has received services. Their residents have received services from either of those programs or both. There's also, some controversy around, well, how does Reggie impact their utility bills in each participating state? And on average, I want to get this wrong, but all energy prices across all of the participating states have increased, but so have all the other states that aren't participating in Reggie. There's arguably those utility rates have increased slower or more gradually than non-participating states in the country.
You said that the Reggie states, the rate of increase is lower than the aggregated other non-participating states?
Yes.
Okay.
Largely. And there's exceptions. Massachusetts they've exceeded much more than the national average. But on average, across the Reggie states, they've increased at a slower rate than the rest of the country. And that was, maybe getting ahead of myself, but that was one of the real sticking points with our current state level administration. Youngkin, Governor Youngkin at the time, I think he had just been elected, was not in office. And that was the first thing he talked about when he had his first stump speech after being elected was, we're going to get rid of Virginia participating in Reggie, referring to it as an excise tax. It's an excise tax on all Virginians. And philosophically, you might gather that we disagree with that. At the end of the day, getting a little philosophical here, what Reggie does is it's ultimately internalizing the externalities of receiving electricity as we are right now. And we've historically been omitted from having to actually pay the full cost of what it takes to generate and consume electricity. So in my mind, it's not an excise tax. It's just paying the full cost. Dominion Energy, they wound up going back and forth. They initially raised their rates or had a line item, they call it a rider, to the tune of about $2.14 or $2.49 per 1,000 kilowatt hours consumed on your typical residential bill. It wound up impacting manufacturing plants, the industrial consumers, far more than residential customers. And I think arguably that's one of the reasons why there was so much lobbying attention driven to removing Virginia from Reggie. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just,
Bill's gonna speak.
yeah, just throw this in because it's important, whether you want to call it a tax, whatever you want to call it. I guess in my mind that we are against, in our society, individuals paying $3-4 more a month on their electric bill to basically save the planet. And I may be getting a little too liberal here, but you heard some information from Chase, 22%, 47%. Reggie's a program working, okay? And it's working in a really big way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So to pay a few dollars a month, come on, folks, I mean, that's not asking too much. And, but the important thing is it's a program that's working. All the data is supporting that. It's the kind of big impact, big public policy impact that we need to really fight climate change. So throw that in.
Appreciate that. And now that we're halfway into this, I should have mentioned from the get-go, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. This is going to be pretty informal. Okay. Sure.
So for weatherization, you can tell if weatherization is working on enough oxygen if you're nice or And I thought too that if you got in a fight at state capitol, you should blame it on climate change. And
Duly noted. For folks that may not have heard that, all fights at the Capitol should be excused due to climate change. I don't disagree. Okay, so I've jumped ahead of my notes quite a bit, so I'm catching up. So we're going to talk, a little bit about Reggie, how it funds the programs in Virginia, or how Virginia and the state legislature decided to use the Reggie proceeds. And talk more specifically about a program that's near and dear to our hearts, which is the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, or WDR. So I prefaced at the start of this talk that since the inception of the weatherization program, this has always been an issue. Billy and I, we conducted a survey of the weatherization providers back in 2019 in preparation for this potential opportunity. And we found that on average, about 1 in every 5 weatherization applicants that qualified, income qualified, they were deferred from receiving services because they had home repairs that were needed before they could receive weatherization effectively. Now, that takes a tremendous amount of administrative time on the weatherization providers. And that's a lot of back and forth with every client to acquire income verification documentation, to get all the sign-offs. There's a lot of paperwork with federally funded programs, a lot of regulation hoops to jump through, only to find out, well, I'm sorry, even though you qualify, even though your home could stand to benefit from receiving weatherization, we can't do anything until you address these home repairs. And we would try to put them in touch with other community-based organizations and churches that might offer some of those repair assistance. But it was just so sparse and so inconsistent. It left so many people just in complete and utter despair. Like, you're already having a bad day, here's a glimmer of hope, and we're going to take it away. And it was such a difficult conversation for the program support staff that are meeting and talking with those clients to have to go through, and to hear so many people break down on the phone in tears that they just can't be serviced by the program. So in this,
Yeah, and keep in mind that every weatherized home on average annually reduces greenhouse gas emissions by 2 to 3 metric tons. So when you're eliminating 20 to 25% of eligible homes, now that's a big lost opportunity in this effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's important as well.
And, oh, Carol.
Can I ask a question too? Because I'm presuming the folks who find station assistance, are you also tracking like the average energy cost burden that they are experiencing as a household? I presume it's high relative to other or residents.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So Carol brought up the question about energy burden. What's the percentage of income that households that qualify for weatherization, how much are they spending on their utility bills relative to their income? And we do capture that, and I don't know the numbers right offhand. But to provide like some context from a national perspective, we refer to households that aren't income qualifying as market rate households. Your typical, and that's your middle income, middle class family. What's most common across the country, if you spend approximately 3% of your monthly or annual income, and that's gross annual income on your utility bills, that's an average energy burden. That's typical. When you start to spend upwards of 6% of your gross annual income on utility expenses, that's when you're starting to be considered energy burdened. Now, the households that we're serving, they tend to not make as much money as the market rate households, and they also can't afford higher quality housing stock, whether they're renting or owning their home. They're typically purchasing less efficient, older housing stock that may just be leaking like a sieve, or have old appliances like furnaces and HVAC systems that are approaching the end of their expected useful life. All of those factors are going to drive their utility bills up. So it's not uncommon that we find households that we serve through weatherization, where their energy burden is approximately 20% or more of their gross annual income. And yeah.
I say I work for volunteer for Montgomery County Emergency Assistance Program. And the utility bill that we see is just crazy, and I know that they're not living in big mansion or anything. It's a small house, but it's just so obviously between their systems and the house itself, so inefficient. It's hard for us to help because we only have so much resources.
Yeah, and so it was more of a comment for folks at home, but gentleman that works for the emergency services, Montgomery County, and they see households that apply for support that have astronomical utility expenses, and that's the challenge with LIHEAP, for example. It's, lack of a better way to phrase it, it's giving a person a fish as opposed to teaching them how to fish. And that's why the LIHEAP transfer dollars to weatherization are arguably, like, there's a need for both the energy assistance, but also the weatherization to keep those bills down, not just help you survive until the next heating or cooling season. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, so energy burden is a huge factor in the households that we target, that we want to reach, are households with the highest energy burdens. So, and I should also mention, Virginia, that figure of 1 in every 5 households being deferred from receiving services, that is greatly offset because we have access to programs like DHCD has a limited pool of resources available for emergency home repair. We also work with several localities, including Blacksburg, that has a municipally funded emergency home repair program. And I know I can speak for community housing partners. our board of directors and has funded for the last at least 20 years from internal, like if there's net income at the end of the year, they will reserve that for the following program year, for the following calendar year, to support those emergency home repairs that do come up. And I think it's up to $350,000 annually that CHP contributes. Other weatherization providers may do the same thing. And so if you go like North Carolina, I think was a state that I heard recently, they defer every 1 in 3 weatherization applicants. And they have very limited access to repair programs like we have in Virginia. So when we conducted that survey, there was the Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency, there was a stakeholder advisory group that would determine a group of advocates from housing advocates, energy and climate advocates, consumer advocates that would help design the programs that would be authorized under the HIE program. I mentioned those 2 programs: Affordable Special Needs Housing Supplemental Program and Weatherization Deferral Repair Program. Between those 2 programs, one was intended to support the Affordable Special Needs Housing, supports the development of more energy efficient low income housing across the Commonwealth. Weatherization Deferral Repair was intended to support reducing the deferral rates in our weatherization program. All told, between when Virginia entered RGGI in March 2021 was our first auction until December 2023, which was the last auction that Virginia participated in. All in, there were $827 million generated from RGGI. And so you can imagine half of that goes to the HIE program, 45% goes to the flood preparedness program. And at this point in time, don't have the hard figures, but about a little over 45 million of that has been allocated to WDR, and about a little over 300 million has gone to affordable special needs housing. And deferral repair. Yeah.
That's the repairs to get it.
Correct. And getting off of a call actually this morning with Virginia DHCD, they reported out that since the WDR program rolled out in July of 2021 up until last month, the program has served 2,000 Virginians across the state. And those households then went on to participate and receive weatherization services. The average investment per home through WDR was about $13,000. I worked when I was at CHP running the program. There were some households that received up to $50,000, $60,000 in repairs. There's limitations on how we can use it and a lot of documentation to justify how we're spending it. But excuse me, sorry about that. There's a tremendous amount of work being done. And private contractors are the ones that stand to benefit from these services. Rarely are the nonprofit weatherization agencies doing the work. They're contracting out trades. And a lot of them are mom and pop trades that benefit from having the additional funding resources. Any questions so far? Any additional contributions, Billy? Well, if not, then let's talk about the RGGI lawsuit. So mentioned that it was one of Youngkin's campaign promises to remove Virginia from RGGI, calling it an excise tax. And but there was a complication. He couldn't get a bill passed through the General Assembly that would undo the legislation that enabled Virginia's participation in RGGI. So, getting crafty, looking at his own toolbox, they issued an executive order and they wound up, I'm gonna go ahead and say it, stacking the Air Pollution Control Board with folks that are more favorable to pushing Youngkin's agenda and at the expense of Virginians. And they decided to take regulatory action to vote to remove Virginia from participating in Reggie, which if anybody has participated or gone through a 7th grade civics class, you might know that you can't undo a piece of legislation through regulatory action. That's just not how things work. So recognizing that this was an issue, we were approached, it's been 2022, by Southern Environmental Law Center to explore whether we would be interested in participating, being represented in a potential lawsuit at the time against challenging the governor's executive action to overturn this piece of legislation. So we, represented by SCLC, we decided to engage, and there were 3 or 4 other members at the time that were also being represented in the case. And through this judicial process, those other organizations were found to not have standing, meaning that they were not directly harmed by this regulatory action. But AECP was the sole survivor, and they determined that we did actually have standing, and we were materially harmed by this action. So that kind of got us down the track of being in a bit of a David and Goliath predicament, where we're a small nonprofit based in Floyd, Virginia. We're a membership-driven organization that we don't have a ton of financial resources, but we're scrappy. And hey, we've done big things before. As I mentioned, but the lie heap transfer dollars in the 90s. So SCLC has been a phenomenal partner in this, and they have, as of November in 2024, so you can imagine these processes are slow, but we finally got a ruling after quite a bit of changes in judges, and they're rescinding their previous order or previous rulings when they said, well, maybe we have a conflict of interest because we own stock in AEP, American Electric Power, APCO. So we had to go through the process again, receiving standing again, and then having a ruling back in, this is November 2024. So we had a judge was actually pulled out of retirement, I think, from down in Bristol, and the court case was held in the Floyd Christiansburg courts here. And Billy was attended all of those hearings. We can speak much more to that at this point, but eventually the outcome in this past November was a judge ruled in our favor that the governor's actions were illegal, that they could not use regulatory action to overturn a piece of legislation, and that we would need to, or Virginia would then be authorized to return into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. However, there was another judicial process. The Attorney General's office requested a stay in the order, and a stay in the order would basically tee up the Attorney General's office to appeal the previous ruling on the case. And during that appeals process, Virginia would not necessarily have to re-enter the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative until after the appeals process has been fully heard. So it's a little challenging to wrap our heads around. We've got a judge that says the governor's actions are illegal. we're out of compliance with the code of Virginia, the law. But we're going to allow you to remain out of compliance with the law until this judicial process is fully wrapped up. And it didn't have to be that way, but that's just how the judge ruled. I feel like you got something to say.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the legal process is working its way. The appeal process will not be completed before we have a new governor or until after we have a new governor. So it's my opinion that from the beginning, the strategy on the part of the Attorney General's office was to delay this. They knew and again, this is my opinion, but they had to know that they were in a losing situation. But they've delayed it, and we could talk a while about how they've done that. So that we will not get back into Reggie while the current government's in office. That's just the way it's going to be. My feeling is we will win the appeal. But we'll have a new governor, and that's really the key situation. And hopefully that will bring about our participation back into Reggie. And it's really important because if you've been listening, and I said this earlier, this is a program that is working on every level. And, we kind of won this battle. We will win this war. But the bottom line is we need to get back into Reggie. Because all the good things that it's doing for everybody. Somebody would come along and get rid of a program like this for political points is sort of what we're seeing. I mean, that's the world we live in. But a couple of quick comments. One of the things that this has brought about is that we brought Reggie back into the news. Created a lot more awareness about it, the importance of this program, the importance of finding public policy that actually combats climate change. I mean, I've spent 40 years trying to get people to change their light bulbs. And it's really programs like Reggie that really make the big difference quickly, which is what we need. So, and one other thing, and kind of in the climate that we live in right now, I'm really proud of AECP and, the work that Chase is doing now. We stood up and we fought back. And no matter how this shakes out, that's what I'm most proud of. AECP has a long history of doing that on all different levels. In the climate we live in right now, stand up, fight back. Climate change is not just being denied or ignored, it's being dismantled. And every one of us should be afraid and scared about that. No, I am. Because of the significance of what's happening to our planet. So I think that's the big thing that we've done. We could talk at length about the legal shenanigans, all of that, but it's been an important fight.
And there are huge, excuse me, there are huge, excuse me, huge societal implications for this work too. We've got case studies from all of our weatherization providers that tout the success of the program and the human impact that it has. There's a woman in in Shenandoah Valley, where because of WDR, she was not deferred from receiving services. She went on to receive not only federal weatherization and some LIHEAP funds, but she also received utility-sponsored funds through Dominion Energy. She had those, and in this case, it was like there was a sewage leak found in her basement that she had not been able to physically go downstairs due to mobility issues for several years. And she's an older woman in her 70s who's still working because she can't afford her living expenses, and she has 2 generations living in her home. Had those repairs not been addressed, there's far more than just the sewage leak in the basement. That house could have likely been condemnable within a few years. That's one person in one family who we prevented from contributing further to the housing crisis in Virginia. And the same thing can be said for the weatherization work. Forget the statistic offhand, but the number one reason that people turn to those payday loan lenders with exorbitant interest rates is to cover their utility bills. The more that we can prevent those folks from going to those payday lenders, the fewer people wind up going through this perpetual cycle of poverty because of that one decision. Please.
So right now, the ready money is not coming in on pause.
Yeah.
And you said that this money was to help 2,000 households. That seems like a really low number.
So yeah, first thing. So the Reggie proceeds that have been generated, that have been allocated, we still have access to those. So the programs are continuing.
So there is still money to be.
Correct.
Okay.
So the 2,000 households, that's just that have received the weatherization deferral repair program. And quick math, the average cost being 13,000, 14,000, forget what that totals up to be, but there are, I want to say about $17 million remaining in the WDR pot. I don't know if I actually have those numbers offhand. The affordable special needs housing, that's serviced, well, these numbers don't include the spring update that was just, I don't know if it's actually been released yet. But as of last fall, so about 6 months ago, over 1,000 units have been served by the affordable special needs housing program as well. And that focuses on elderly, disabled, formerly homeless, and extremely low income households.
Yeah, I agree. Way back when the Reggie was decided legislature, did they consider just a direct tax on carbon? And do you think that kind of a tax, well, there's probably little appetite for it, I guess, for legislature, but would that be a better form of a climate tax than a cap and trade system like the Virginians?
Can you repeat the question, she said, folks?
Yeah, so the question is, at the time of the legislation, was a climate tax considered as opposed to a market-based, regional greenhouse gas initiative? And my limited understanding, I was loosely involved on the peripheries of those conversations. I don't believe that was in the conversation just because of presumably how much opposition it would get from more conservative minded legislators. But could it benefit? I mean,
Well, that's a good question,
Yeah.
but I think Chase is right. I think that's specifically a tax, just would have been tremendous opposition. May not have thought through participation in Reggie. It's kind of back to what you were saying. Something that's interesting is no one knew how much money was going to be coming in. I think people were surprised at the amount of money that was generated through these auctions. And in my opinion, once we get back into Reggie and this money starts coming back in, there are so many other things we can do with it. I think we've shown that the WDR program can do just so much, and hundreds of millions of dollars is more than that program needs. There's a lot of other things that can be done. So I think that's really important to note. we've lost a lot of money on the table. That could be used so many different ways, and it's just nonsensical. So, but we'll be back.
Yeah, it's roughly $500 million that we've missed out on since not participating in the auction since December 2023. Carol?
So, I have a question. I just want to turn on what Billy said, being proud of ACP and their role in this lawsuit. And you had mentioned originally that SCLC or advocacy groups, and this is the importance of showing up and standing up, because at the time, I think you rightfully thought you were part of a cohort that was standing up, and the Fairfax County judge wiped away all the other plaintiffs and said they didn't have standing for various and sundry reasons that we might not agree with. But you were the last folks standing, and had you not stepped up, we wouldn't be where we are. And we're still not where we need to be. We're not back in Reggie, but we sort of have a pretty straightforward glide path to getting back in. And so I think that we really need to recognize how critical that was that you all stepped up. And I'm personally proud that that sort of emerged from the new route, right?
That first case was in Northern Virginia, which is like in another country, it's like way, way, way. And when the other three were dismissed, and the judge said, I'm not giving AECP standing, but I think they might have standing, but I want to send it back to Floyd. I live a block from the courthouse, and I'm thinking, boy, talk about something coming home. But we had to make that decision as an organization. SCLC immediately said, you guys still want to participate? We dramatically and emphatically said yes. It's for the long haul, for all the reasons that Chase has talked about and help those people. So thanks, Carol.
And it's in
Southern Environmental Law Center. Yeah.
Yeah, SCLC, they are, and this is all pro bono. They do this work for free, and they are, having been in the hearings, Attorney General staff, some sharp people. These are smart, experienced lawyers. And to watch the two go back and forth, I mean, I was extremely proud of SCLC, and they're tough, and they did an absolutely wonderful job. They did get their court costs. That was the other thing that came out of the last hearing. Attorney fees that the Attorney General's office has to pay them. So that was a cool thing too. It wasn't much, but anyway, that was cool too. So
you can attorney into SCLC.
yeah, they take donations at SCLC, and it's they do incredible.
We won't turn you down either.
On behalf of Sustainable Blacksburg, we have a little thank you for you.
Thank you.
Repurposed tote bags with our thank you.
And do you want to tell us why they're repurposed?
They were originally printed for an organization. So they canceled it and they donated hundreds of that. Yeah. So enjoy.